But the number one reason why people end up with severe wrist extension, there's two big reasons. I'll start with number one, is they put the barbell way too high in their hand. They put it up here on their calluses. If I grab it lackadaisically and grab it in my calluses, it doesn't matter how much I'm squeezing the bar, how active I am. The second I bring this out in front of me, I slip into massive extension. So that's the first and number one reason. Second reason, sometimes people have decent bar placement in their hand. They just don't squeeze it. They don't grip it. They're not active. But again, let's go back to number one reason. To fix this, a very easy fix, the barbell valley trick. This is the barbell valley. It's where the barbell likes to live. So I'm going to make this gesture with my hand. I grab it. I make this gesture with my hand. I push that barbell to the meat of my palm in barbell valley, squeeze it like it's actively trying to get away from me, bring it out in front of me, and I have a nice joint centrated, stacked position that my barbell will not leave as long as I am actively squeezing it just like I should.
I like it.
Awesome. Now, Kyle, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about hip extension dominant, leg drive, or glutes leaving the bench.
Yeah. Another one we've demoed for fun on Instagram and duct taped somebody, I think me, to the bench, and used a bungee as well, used a band.
Chalk on the ass too.
Yep.
Can't forget that.
And you'll actually see that from powerlifters. This is an interesting thing to bring up from athletes who chalk their glutes or chalk their clients' glutes on bench. Now, the thought is, well, if I have chalk here, there won't be slippage. So I'm going to use my hand here for a second. Imagine this is my arch, this is my shoulders and my head. If I'm driving with my legs out here, trying to shove this way, if my glutes slide a little bit on the bench, this way, and my shoulders are locked in, this would be my glutes now, it's not a bad thing. What we want is energy transfer this way. We do not want energy transfer that way. So we joke, because I don't understand why chalking the glutes is bad, when we're trying to force energy to go this way. It's not glue. It will not glue your singlet or your butt to the bench. So it's really a waste of chalk. We don't care about energy going this way until it's transferred into the bar. And that sounds kind of weird because we're talking about the same direction, but two different points. If I'm thinking about throwing a punch, I want leg drive and rotation of the hips, but I'm not doing this, right? I'm not throwing my hips at the punching bag first and then trying to recover and throw my hand. That's the same thing that happens here. So what we're talking about is leg drive, and this also happens from people who are not actively driving with their legs this way. They relax, and when the bar touches their chest, they drive their butt up this way. Now, the only benefit that has, and why a lot of people's bodies do it naturally, if you bench pressed enough, I'm going to change the angle of my shoulder if I can lift my hips up very high, and I'm going to start to turn this into a decline press. Because of the fibers of the pec, the way they insert, the angle they twist and insert on your upper arm bone or your humerus, they're at a stronger position in a dip position or a decline press than a flat. That's another reason why arching makes your bench stronger. We're reducing the range of motion, but we're also changing the line of pull through the muscle here. So if you feel stronger because your butt comes up, the only reason is because you're changing the angle of the pec. Now, most people that don't have good leg drive, if they get to that on their final set, butt comes up, they finish the rep, they felt a little stronger with their butt coming up. As you fine-tune your pressing with what we teach you here, if your butt comes off the bench, you might even miss the rep because you didn't optimize your optimal leg drive coming this way, right? Constant leg drive, bar touches the chest. There should just be a little bit more. Never energy lost here when I'm trying to drive it into the barbell.
Absolutely. And there's a few different ways that we can cue somebody out of this. One of the biggest of which is just drive towards the wall behind you or drive towards the barbell. Act like you're trying to go through that slip and slide like I referred to earlier. Another good one is pretend Kyle's in a bench press position. Simply putting some tension around the knees is actually a really effective way to get rid of this. So we can put a band around the knees, or you can just take a partner and actually push the knees inward, and he actively resists against me. You'll notice he's already sliding up the bench. So by encouraging him to slide back like a slip and slide and getting a little bit of that stimulus against the knees, oftentimes that hip extension bias tends to go away just like that. Now, last big fault I want to talk about is scapular function issues, and these are very common in the bench press. Now, the first thing we have to talk about, though, in relation to this is there's kind of a fundamental disagreement with how the scapula should articulate itself, or less of articulate itself, more of how the scapula should start position-wise in the industry. For the longest time, Kyle can speak to this really well since he's been in powerlifting longer than myself. For the longest time, it was a common thought that we had to start in very deep retraction, right? And I would even say that's a consensus for quite some time. This is all we really knew. And then once functional anatomy and clinicians and people that knew the body really well as far as how it functioned started to get into powerlifting, we started seeing more and more people biasing towards depression rather than retraction. And I know with me personally, for the longest time, I was stuck at that 375, 380 marker. I could not get to that big 400 number. I was stuck there for probably 2 years. And then upon coming to train at Kabuki, finding out what scapular depression was, I was absolutely amazed. I'll never forget the day that I learned how to depress. I learned how to depress. I think it was one of the coaches here actually that put me through a few depression specific drills, and I depressed in my bench press. I did my 5 sets of 5 or whatever it may be, and I remember just feeling more stable. I remember feeling so much more stable. I remember those reps being pretty darn easy, but here was the most powerful thing I noticed. The next day, my pecs felt like they were going to explode off my chest like a damn pimple. They were so sore. My lats, for the first time ever, were so sore. My pecs and lats felt absolutely terrible the next day, and the reason why was because I used them for the first time ever in the bench press out of nowhere. So this is actually a really important note and speaks to the benefit this can provide you. When we learn to depress, to preface the bench press eccentric, all of a sudden we get better utilization of our lats, providing our bench press better stability, but furthermore, we get better recruitment of the pecs as well. And for a lot of people out there, they've bench pressed for so many years and they've never felt their pecs in the bench press. This is one of the primary reasons as to why.
Yeah, and if you're watching or you are probably watching this at home, but as you're watching this, if you're hearing, well, you know, I am not that big of a bench presser, 375 is ahead of my lifetime goal, and this guy's talking about going over 400. Those are strong numbers for a lot of athletes, even in powerlifting, but note where he was before that, couldn't break 4, and we just talked about him going well into the mid to low 5s. The increase of how much exploded since then is huge. And I know you put on a lot of decent muscle mass as well. So if we're looking for hypertrophy gains, if we're looking for strength gains, this will unlock a big secret. It's also going to keep the shoulder healthy. And you can please try this at home. So as you're watching along, stick your arms up in this Frankenstein position. The first thing we're going to do is squeeze our shoulder blades together as hard as we can. I don't mean like kind of touch them together. I mean cramping up, squeeze them. Reach across and squeeze your other pec. I can get some tension out of this bad boy, but it's not optimal. I know I can do better. Now, that's retraction. Shoulder blades go back. That's the squeeze your shoulder blades cue. We're staying a void in the bench press. We also avoided that in the squat, the overhead press, and in deadlift, we don't want to shorten ourselves as well. So really not a good thing to do in any of our major lifts. Even the drills Snell took us through is a more neutral scapular position, so joints can maintain optimal position. They're more centrated. We don't do this in any of our groundwork through the floor as we're rehabbing our back. So noticing that, it comes across in all areas. Now, scapular depression, as Brandon said, is down. Pec and lat are major depressors and stabilizers of the scapula or the shoulder blade depending on the athlete's action. So here, there wasn't much. If I come into depression, boom, look what happens to my pec already. It's more active. So regardless of your goals, strength, hypertrophy, function, fun, you're gonna use that muscle mass a lot better. So again, depress, squeeze your pec as hard as you can, reach across. That is a lot more engagement because this is shortening pec fibers, or sorry, lengthening them because I have to go back, they're opening up. This is actually putting them in a shortened position where they're optimally working. The other problem with retraction, We'll run out of room early, so our only way to get to the chest is similar to that head up, elevation and dumping. That is hell on your shoulder capsule. Even leads to pec tears. We've seen a ton of injuries. If you bench that way, please stop before you have an injury. Stop your friends, right? Get them to watch this part of the video. We need them to get out of that position. Here's the note though, where the argument gets weird. People go back and forth. We're pretty neutral because we think about the function of the scapula. We're not saying don't retract. What happens at the bottom of a bench press? I'm pretty much maximally retracted. What happens at the bottom of a row or a seated row? We find retraction. You can't start there. Start from anchoring the scapula in good depression, pec and lat are more available to do their job correctly. As the bar gets closer to my chest, whether I'm benching or rowing, naturally the scapula will stay down, not elevated, and it will come together at the bottom. So for people arguing back and forth which one's right or wrong, they're both right, and that's the confusing part. It's where in the press do they come in. For that optimal performance point, it must be depressed first for stabilization, and then let the body naturally go through its patterning.